welcome JoJo O'Neill, a volunteer with the American Lung Association, to our chat today. JoJo, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jenna. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm excited to just get some heartfelt insider perspective from someone who is so familiar with lung disease and also who is absolutely involved in the shaping of the organization through the input that you've shared, which thank you, by the way.
Sure.
Uh, yeah. So, why don't you give us a little bit of your story, if you would, so we can understand kind of who you are and how you came to be a part of the American Lung Association?
Sure, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me. I always am very grateful when someone wants to hear my story and my perspective, and when they actually are interested in that and listen to it and can take something away from it that can be of some assistance, hopefully, to somebody, because that's really all I want to do is be helpful to those who are experiencing lung disease, which is something that has not been a part of my entire life. I was very active as a kid, very athletic. And then when I became a teenager, I started baton twirling and I was a dancer, And so fast forward to 2004, and I ended up with a lot of congestion in my lungs, left over from what I thought was a chest cold, but it's just continued to get worse and worse over an entire year. It's pretty much got to the point where I just could not breathe. There was so much fluid in my lungs. And so I went out and had to find a doctor. At that point, I'd had no other health issues, so I had to find a primary care doctor at that point. And so, long story short, the diagnosis was asthma, which I still suspect it may have been a hereditary type of deal because our mother had asthma, and and my siblings have it as well. And it usually hit us all after the age of 40. And so that's when I began to experience struggles breathing and not knowing anything about asthma other than the fact that I'm familiar with that name, but I have no idea what it means. That sort of prompted me to not only ask questions for myself, but being a radio personality, having my listeners praying for me, reaching out to me, asking about asthma, and then sharing their stories is when I realized that what, a whole lot of us have this. Why don't we know more about it? And that just kind of prompted me to start a nonprofit organization, and then also to associate with the American Lung Association and eventually become a part of their patient advisory group to see what I could do to help just get, because education is lacking from a patient perspective. So that's where I wanted to focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I understand when I read the one of the it's not a catchphrase, but a tag, let's say,
Right.
when it says, "When you can't breathe, nothing else matters." And
Absolutely.
I think that often we get into this space where the disease or the condition is taking all of your brain space to where maybe,
It's true.
being able to go out there and seek information feels really hard or overwhelming because you're just trying to make it through the day. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you learned initially from getting in touch with the Lung Association that maybe you were able to share with your audience and your family?
Basically, that there is a community of people out there ready to connect with me. I've learned
Mm,
that.
hmm.
But just also a lot of good information from the American Lung Association about my condition, other breathing conditions, places where we can go, a lot of articles with the latest information on treatment,
Hmm.
efforts toward research, and definitely efforts towards education about the condition itself. So they just approached it from a lot of different angles, especially, like I said, education, advocacy, and research. And so there's just a lot of information for patients that can help us from our side of things to understand what's going on, because that in turn makes us better patients for our doctors. And so it all kind of works together as one big asthma family and one hub. And every
Mm.
person and every part of it, every piece fits into the puzzle to get us to a point where we can survive and have a better quality of life when dealing with these lung health issues.
Absolutely. Tell
Mm.
me a little bit more about how the information helps you become a better patient.
Um, well, kind of for example, there are tips on what you can do to help battle the symptoms. Trying to think of some examples right offhand. What I really like, one area that I found interesting on the Lung Association's website and from interacting with those associated with the Lung Association is hearing other people's stories. They feature those out there as well, and those are really helpful. Other people's stories and what they're going through and their journeys and things that they've tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
We even have stuff as simple as, information as simple as, taking a couple sips of black coffee or hot coffee will sometimes provide a little bit of relief. So I
Mm.
like that they provide not only medical information, but also information that's just average, everyday, around the house type of deals, peppermint tea, things like that. And
Yeah.
then those are shared from other patients as well. So anything that we can do to, combat those symptoms and to just breathe better. So it's a lot of good information, like I said, from the medical community as well, and as well as from the patients out there. I like hearing their stories too.
Excellent. And you spoke a little bit about finding out that there was a community that was out there willing to connect and share the stories.
Yeah.
What do you think is the major role that community plays in people living with lung disease?
Yeah, just like any support group for any other condition or any other issue or challenge that people deal with, just having that support. For me, I used to feel as if no one around me understood what it was like to struggle to breathe, and that was pretty
Mm.
much true. And so I would find myself not saying a lot if I started feeling symptoms. I wouldn't say anything because I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I didn't want to cause any problems or any issues. I didn't want to frustrate anybody. But eventually I get to the point where I'd have to say something. It's like, look, I'm
Sure.
struggling to breathe. And so I need your help, get me to the ER, that
Mm-hmm.
type of
That's
deal.
that's
Yeah,
it's like the
it's hard.
strong woman
Yeah.
persona, right? Yep. I can
Yes.
handle it until I can't.
Until I can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It really is. But education is so important for us to learn how how to deal with what we're going through. And the best way is to talk with others who are going through it. So that
Yeah.
whole support hub and support system is important because no one's symptoms are exactly the same. No one's triggers
Right.
are exactly the same. But the end result, we can't breathe, that we all
Mm-hmm.
have in common. And so when you can interact with someone who knows exactly what that feels like, it gives you, you know, some incentive and some encouragement to keep going. And we can all find answers together that will help us individually and collectively.
Yeah, I can imagine it feels so important to have people who can speak the language of your disease. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that's been helpful in you being able to express some of your needs to people who aren't living with lung disease, family members or friends, things like that.
It has been in hearing other people's stories and connecting through a support network to other patients and hearing some of the ways that they describe what they're going through. It helps when it comes to dealing with those who are living outside of dealing with lung health issues. We come up with catchphrases like breathing is fundamental, or,
Mm,
when you can't breathe, nothing else matters.
that's right.
Or there was one other, we use the term a lot, just breathe. You know,
Mm,
um,
mm-hmm.
there are others, but they'll pop into my head eventually. But just here's one thing that we like to do. It's like a little test that we do with those who are outside of the lung health community, those who don't have lung diseases. We'll take little cocktail straws, little tiny sippy straws, tiny ones, and we'll have someone hold their nose and just breathe through that little tiny straw.
Mm,
And we
mm.
say, see how long you can do that with having to struggle to draw in breath through that tiny little straw and hold
Mm-hmm.
your nose. See how long you can survive. We call it the straw test. And 9 times out of 10, most people don't make it to 10 seconds, let alone 15 seconds, and they immediately pull it away and go, "Oh, wow, that's just a little bit of what you're experiencing." I say, "Yeah, that's just a little bit of what we experience when our lungs have tightened up and, we are struggling to get that air in and we're wheezing and, just having a difficult time and not being able to focus on anything else other
Mm.
than where's my next breath coming from. The entire body is on full alert. We got to
Yeah.
force our bodies to breathe in and out. So, yeah, things like that will help, get that information across to those who've never had to struggle to breathe.
What a great bridge from a place of, maybe not having the information to a place of empathy. Because it does, I mean, obviously, we don't want to impart difficulty breathing on anyone, but if they
Right.
can feel the sense of the challenge, then suddenly they can step better into your shoes and maybe understand a little bit more. It's really, it reminds me of the spoon theory they use in autoimmune communities. I don't know if you've ever heard of that
I've
one.
never heard of that one.
It's an interesting one. So it was created by a woman who was having a conversation with her friend, and her friend didn't understand. She said, "You look okay. You look fine.
Mm,
I don't know. It doesn't seem like you're sick." And she said, "Well, let me
hmm
show you how my illness manifests." And she gave her, a like a container of spoons like you would get at a diner, and she said, "Okay, well, talk me through your morning." And she talked her through waking up and brushing your teeth, and each one of those is a spoon, each one of those is a spoon, so it costs you some energy, the energy
Oh,
represented by
yeah.
the spoon. And
Mm-hmm.
so the person without autoimmune uses a lot of spoons, and
Mm-hmm.
so the other person took half of the spoons away, and she said, "Okay, now you're working with this, and there's no guarantee you're going to get any more spoons after you use these ones up, so you have to really pick and choose which ones are going to be important for you to use, because you might be able to go to the grocery store and you might be able to, take a walk, but you can't do both.
Oh,
So you got to
wow.
choose." And so it's, I think pieces of information that kind of put people into the mindset of what it is look like to what it looks like to stare the challenge in the face and
Yeah,
have to figure out what your choices are in that space
hmm,
are just so, so important. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, thank you for
Wow.
sharing the straw test too.
And
I
thank
think
you
I'm
for
I'm going to
sharing
use
that
that one.
that spoon test too. I'd never heard that one, but it just
Yeah.
helps people to understand or be more empathetic toward what we're going through. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what happens in community, right? Even whether it's
Yep.
about the same illness or different illnesses, we start to come together because the human condition is one of struggle,
That's
and
right.
some people have more struggle along with it. But that's one thing we can really align with, I believe.
Yep. The
Um,
struggle is
yeah,
real.
the
Hmm.
struggle is
That's
real.
another catchphrase. Yes.
Is it really?
Yeah, some days I say, I feel like I'm driving the struggle bus today. I'm not just a
Yeah,
passenger.
yeah,
It's a tougher day than
yeah.
yesterday.
Beep beep.
Yes. Oh my
Absolutely,
goodness.
absolutely.
Mm.
So I'm curious, you've been a part of some of the focus groups for American Lung Association. What are some of the insights that have come out of those conversations? And how do you think that they've influenced some of the content and the direction that the American Lung Association is headed?
It's interesting because I was fortunate enough to be selected to be a part of the patient advisory group with the American Lung Association from its inception. And
Mm.
so going from the very first meeting where we are all kind of looking at each other going, the lung association is going, okay, what can we do to help you? And we're looking at them going, well, what is it that you want from us that will help you? We were trying to figure
Yeah.
it out. Fast forward to these several years later, where now the patient advisory group members are becoming infused into the process of helping clinicians and researchers to get their clinical studies off the ground, and to
Oh.
have input from a patient perspective about different insights that go into the research and the work that they're doing, clinical trials and studies and things of that nature. We're able to provide input to help them with that, and that is a really big step. Even things that's, I say, as simple as, but marketing materials, for example, where they get our input on how does this look, or is this something that is appealing to the eye,
Mm.
or in one of the pieces of written material that they were planning to use. And I said, well, if you're going to send that out to people 40 and over, you need to increase the size of the font. you know, and they were like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. I'm like, yeah,
Hallelujah.
because at this age, these are
I
not
know
fashion.
it's
It's
on
not
the
a fashion
biggest
statement.
one.
So things like that, everything that we can think of from a patient's perspective, we provide input, for the doctors, researchers, clinicians, for administrative staff, everybody who's involved, marketing folks, and it's well received. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that has really been rewarding to us. And I think I can speak on behalf of the patient advisory group. It's been rewarding to know that we're not just being blown off like, oh yeah, that's what they said, but we're going to do this. They're really listening to our ideas and implementing our ideas. And they ask us questions. Sometimes they send surveys, and we'll give our honest opinion and our feedback from our perspective. So that's the best way to find out how to serve a lung health patient. Ask the patient.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
I think
Uh-huh.
it's like again another bridge to making treatments and even studies more effective. I know from a
Absolutely.
wellness perspective, sometimes you see these studies and you're like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but you didn't work with the people who are going to be affected by the outcome of this study. You did
Exactly.
it on rats or healthy
Right.
humans or whatever it is. You
Exactly.
didn't look at the actual subjects that you need to account for.
Yeah.
So thank you to the advisory board for the work that you're doing. I'm glad to hear that it's been instrumental in guiding a lot of the initiatives forward, and I'm sure that the people on the receiving end are grateful as well.
Yeah, we're just
Yeah.
grateful, and thank you to the American Lung Association for hearing us. We appreciate that. It even helps to improve the doctor-patient relationships, and how
Mm-hmm.
the doctors interact with the patients and how they talk to us, the type of language that they use. And
Mm.
it goes hand in hand, because the more we know as patients also from that educational perspective, the better patients it makes us for the doctors. It makes their jobs a lot easier to diagnose and treat if we're in compliance. And a lot of times we're not in compliance simply because we just don't know what we don't
Ah.
know. And so to educate us, it makes us better patients too.
And when you talk about the sorts of language the doctors use, is it more on the side of straight talk, for lack of a better word, versus
Absolutely. Like,
medical jargon? Yeah.
just bring it down here, Doc.
Bring
Bring
it
it
down.
down here. Bring it down a little bit.
Yeah.
What is that? What does this long word mean? you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't make me
It's
look
not
it up.
like,
Don't make me Google it.
right, right. And sometimes I watch medical shows and I'm like, yeah, is this, like the medical dramas
Oh
where they
yeah.
have to like educate the audience on what they're talking about. So they have to use all the big words to, it's like, no, just tell
Yeah,
us,
it's
tell us what's going on.
intimidating. It's intimidating. And
Yeah.
a lot of times patients will just sit there and smile and nod. And even if they're asked by a doctor or someone in the office staff, medical staff, okay, so you understand? Because at that
Mm-hmm.
point, you don't even know what to ask or how to
Yeah.
ask it.
Information
You know,
overload. Yeah. That's so
absolutely.
important.
It is
So important.
intimidating. Hmm.
So one of the things that we're working on right now, and well, hopefully the viewers who are watching and listening to this will be inside of the PCN Wellness Hub, which is a collection of practices and exercises and interviews and recipes that are really designed to support the quality of life of people who are living with lung disease. And we say people, the person first. I
Yes.
wonder when wellness, the word wellness, or even well being comes to mind, what comes up for you?
To me, that just a word that encompasses everything. T- Wellness, overall wellness, from head to
Mm,
toe, really, because when you think about it, there are so many other things that can affect our breathing other than, and other than maybe just our immediate triggers. There are, you mentioned a nutrition section
mm-hmm.
of the patient hub that's coming up, because there are certain foods that can either help or cause more damage or even
Sure.
harm. Some are anti-inflammatory that will help us. We need to know certain types of things that are good for us to eat that may help with our breathing, or what types of things to drink that may help with our breathing. I mentioned a little while ago, peppermint tea is one of my go-tos because it
Mm,
really just kind of opens up my sinuses as
mm-hmm.
well as helps with my lung issues. But yeah, just for me, when you say wellness, it's just a whole body approach, psychological.
Yeah.
Even with my nonprofit organization, we focus on education. We will sometimes, during our monthly support group meetups, we'll sometimes bring in psychologists or therapists to approach it from that angle, because anxiety kicks in when you're having trouble breathing. That's one of the first things. And even with cardiologists, because when we struggle to breathe also, the heart races,
Yeah.
because the heart and lungs are like peanut butter and jelly. They are so
Mm,
closely related. So just
mm-hmm.
different thing. Oh, wellness to me means approaching it from every angle that you can think of to get a whole body wellness going on, even from as far as weight management. I know that at one point during my journey, I was on heavy doses of steroids, which increased my weight
Yeah.
drastically and very quickly.
Yeah.
And so there was an entire different struggle that came into play at that point, because there'd be times where I'd be huffing and puffing and struggling to breathe, and it had nothing to do with asthma. It's because I was heavy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
People are like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're having trouble with your asthma." No, I'm just heavy. I'm struggling
Yeah.
to walk because I'm chunky now. And
This.
yeah, so that whole
Yeah.
body overall wellness, sometimes some of the treatments will cause other issues. I had to take one medication to combat the potential onset of diabetes because of the
Mm,
treatment I
mm-hmm.
was getting to help my
Mm-hmm.
lungs. It
Mm-hmm.
could possibly cause
Mm-hmm.
something else. So it's for me, wellness is an all-encompassing term that I am excited to see the Lung Association continue to embrace, because they've always done that,
Yeah.
really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And really, really taking a holistic approach, like you're saying. I mean,
yeah,
I think that, when you look down look through the lens of like general health and well-being,
yeah.
there's an understanding across the board of how we think things are supposed to be based on what we see in the media and based on, the people who look the most well, whatever that means. But
Hmm.
you have those people out there. What we don't get is those underneath stories, like you're saying. We don't get the effect of steroids on the body, which is major. So many of
Yeah,
my clients are dealing with exactly what you're talking about, or the mental effect that goes into
yes,
play when you introduce a new medication that's treating your disease, but also messing with your mind a little bit. And
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, the support is necessary for sure.
yeah.
I wonder if you can imagine somebody coming to the American Lung Association website and seeing that wellness button, let's say.
Yeah.
um, what do you think they are going to be most excited to receive?
Oh my goodness. First of all, excited to receive a one-stop shop sort of a deal. Honey,
Yeah.
I'm home. Here's this one hub that can help me with every angle that I can think of as it pertains to dealing with my lung health. I can
Mm,
interact and communicate with people who are experiencing just what I'm going through. I can get information from the doctors. I can find out different treatments. I can learn where to go if I need, to learn what to foods I can eat that may help with my condition or what may harm my condition, or just just that one stop shop. It's really kind of tiring when you have to click around to find the things that you may need, and then try and
Yeah.
gather it all together into
Right.
one location. So when it's done for us, it just makes our job a whole lot easier. It's like, honey,
Mm.
I'm home. Look at this. It's a
Yeah.
whole wellness hub just for us, and as well as, in addition to the patients, also the caregivers, because that's a tough job too. I used to really
Absolutely.
worry my family years ago, unintentionally, but they would have to watch me struggle to breathe. And it was I had to realize that that was very traumatic for them, not knowing what to do to help me. That
Yeah.
they were experiencing right along with me. So yeah, for the patients and the caregivers as well. Just a one-stop shop, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
fantastic. Thank you for that feedback. It's really good to hear because I think that that's our entire intention. And you, as you said to your point, the caregiver role is so important, but it's often the one that isn't focused upon as strongly as the patient for
Yeah.
obvious reasons.
Hmm.
And one of our objectives is to really strengthen the relationship between patient and caregiver so that there will be practices for folks to do together to have fun with or explore or move or breathe. And
Yeah.
it's just going back to the space of community to bridge that gap and pull people into the practices together has been a really important goal. So that is good to hear. What about you? What's on your wellness wish list?
My wellness wish list. Let me think. I'm going to have to think back to the
Yeah.
time when my symptoms weren't under control.
Sure. Or even
Yeah,
now. I mean, you can be bold now.
that's true. Right now, nowadays, after many, many years of asking questions and educating myself, and of course, that's a never-ending cycle. You continue to learn. But after getting to a point where I actually feel like I've never been diagnosed, and that's because of the current treatment, but it took a lot of time to get there. But
Mm,
I'm thinking back to a time when I really struggled, and on my wellness wish list is for the general public, I think, to be more informed about the
mm,
dangers of lung disease. It almost
mm-hmm.
feels, and me having asthma, I'll be speaking from an asthma patient perspective. Asthma, in my opinion, just feels like it gets overlooked, taken for granted, really
Yeah.
kind of tossed aside, like, oh, yeah, it's just asthma, because it's
Yeah.
a term that so many people are familiar with, but
Mm-hmm.
very few, unless they have experienced it personally, know what the underlying meaning of that is. And sometimes you have to put it in their face. People die. Think
Mm,
about what happens when you don't breathe, people. So
yeah.
for me, I think my wellness wish would be for the general public to have a better grasp of just what lung health means and the importance of it. Because that's the part
Yeah.
that I really have to explain to a lot of people outside of the lung health community. Here's what we go through, and here's what this means. And
Yeah.
they're not, being mean about it. They just, because breathing is effortless until you have to struggle to do it. And so it's just
Right.
not something that comes across their radar. And so asthma does, in my opinion, like I said, get overlooked and taken for granted and marginalized. And so that's my wellness wish, is that everyone knows the significance, the importance of breathing well.
Yeah. Breathing well. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is interesting. I'm largely in the wellness and fitness space. And so
Mhm.
like so many folks are trying to optimize breath for high performance and do all that,
Mhm.
just really like work the system
Yes.
in a body that's not encumbered by disease or dysfunction.
Hmm.
And what I think would be so helpful is if we could turn down the volume on that need to optimize and instead understand the different levels that breathing exists on, and that
Hmm.
there are possibilities and limitations at each level, and we should all be aware of them for each other,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to things like environment, right?
Yes. Yes.
What
Yes.
are your I'd love to just hear some of your commentary on maybe some simple things that people who aren't living with lung disease can be conscientious about in terms of the environments they're responsible for.
Because yeah, first I like to to say to people, we all need to breathe. We all need
Mm-hmm.
to breathe. And I often tell people who have no lung health issues, you don't want to get to the point where you do have any lung health issues. And then I also like to ask those who are not personally diagnosed with any type of lung disease. I usually like to ask them, do you know someone? Is there someone you know personally who either has asthma or COPD or some or lung cancer or some other lung health issue? 9 times out of 10, they will say yes, and then they'll begin to share their story, so when it's personal, when we have them make it personal to them, then I
Mm.
think they will be a lot more understanding when it comes to the environment. One brief example is when, for example, smokers, and I'm a reformed smoker myself, so I but sometimes people don't realize that just because they're outdoors, they think that it's not going to affect people around
Yeah.
them or the
Yeah.
environment, and not
Right.
picking on
Right.
smokers or anything, but, just d-
Something to be conscious
something
of.
definitely to be
Mm-hmm.
conscious of, and other things that will affect the environment and the quality of our air,
Yeah.
so even when it comes to littering and trash and stuff that's
Sure.
laying around,
Yeah.
so
What's interesting, there's a lot of wellness spaces that, include things like incense and candles and,
yes,
scents, big, heavy scents.
yeah,
And it's always curious to me as to whether or not they thought about that choice.
yeah,
Because there's going to be breathing happening in that environment. And
absolutely.
for those who have lung disease, we want to make
Sure.
it as easy as possible to get the breath they need.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot more, just as one example, restaurants, for one example, that used to have actually the candles on the tables for dining.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a lot more of them going to like the tea lights,
The
the
e-candle, yeah, a little.
e-candles and things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I sometimes still occasionally will receive gifts, and most times from people who aren't really close to me, because candles are beautiful and they're wonderful and they smell
Mm-hmm.
great. But sometimes people will gift them to me, and I will be very gracious and I go, "Oh, this is beautiful and it smells wonderful. I won't be able to light it, but I can still smell it,
There you
so things
go.
like that,
Yeah.
they're like, oh my God, I didn't
Yeah.
even think about that, like, yeah, because
Yeah.
every little tendril of smoke is something that's affecting my air quality and my environment,
Yeah.
so stuff
Yeah.
like
It's
that.
interesting. It's just a little information can go such a long way, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And, we
Yeah.
just want to spread the information and, reach as many people as we can to share our
Yeah.
stories.
Beautiful. Speaking of which, what's something that you believe would be helpful for people living with lung disease to hear?
That there's hope, that there
Hmm.
is hope, that there are things that we can do in addition to just our treatment that we receive from the medical community. There are other things that we can do on our own, to connect with support groups, being one,
Mm-hmm.
with people who are going through the same thing and sharing tips on things that might help, like, hey, this might work. This worked for me. Why don't you try this? Or but never to give up hope and to never stop seeking information and
Mm.
education about their condition. My condition when I was first diagnosed was so awful because of basic lack of knowledge. I didn't know that I may have to treat myself with medication every day for the rest of my life. I would take it until I started
Mm.
feeling better, then I'd stop.
Mm.
Then my lungs
Mm.
would fill up with fluid again. Then I struggle to breathe, and so it
Mm.
was a
Mm-hmm.
never-ending cycle. So just, I one thing I would say to the lung health community is never give up hope and never stop seeking information and education.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's really coming back to that living element of it, that
Absolutely.
quality of life,
Yeah.
including your disease, but also really focused on how you are living through your day. And hope is a
Sure.
major
It
ingredient
is.
to
Don't let it
keep
define you.
going.
Don't let that diagnosis define
Yeah.
who you are. With my organization, my Let's Kick Asthma nonprofit, we focus on what we can do with asthma as
Yeah.
opposed to the things that we can't do. We don't focus on the limitations. Focus on the expectations of what we're going to be able to do, and then the things that we are able to do, and just, conquer those challenges as best we can to do, do what we can to breathe better. But we never focus on what we can't do and the limitations that asthma may bring in our life. So that's another
Yeah.
thing, that don't focus on what you can't do, but focus on what you can do, and
Right.
try to make things as
Right.
best as you can, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we talk about behavioral change, we always say the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
I
So
like
if
that.
you're approaching and able to approach your condition with a sense of hope, that is going to have that trickle effect
Absolutely.
and working on that positive mindset.
Mhm. And then
Yeah,
also I would
beautiful.
say to them, don't be afraid to challenge yourself.
Mm,
Definitely stay in compliance with what your doctors are offering you for treatment. Definitely stay in compliance, but don't be afraid to challenge yourself. For me, my challenge is my. And here's the funny part: my allergist is on the third floor. Every month I go in for my treatment, and I
uh-huh.
choose the stairs over the elevator every time. And to me, it's
Right
almost like a
on.
gauge as to how well I'm breathing. There are days when I would struggle at the top of that third flight of stairs. And then there are other days when I go up the three flights and the recovery time is minimal with my lungs.
Yeah,
So there's little things like that, or I'll park a little further away in the parking lot and walk a little further. So don't be afraid to, without endangering your health, your lung
of
health, don't be
course.
afraid to challenge yourself. Yeah.
There's a way that we talk about that concept that you're talking about pushing your edges,
Oh.
finding ways to challenge yourself,
Mhm.
and it's a check-in process. So we work from the premise that on any given day you have a certain amount of movement, you know, pushing energy
Mhm.
that's available to you. And like you say, some days you're going to have more of that
Right.
based on a number of different factors, whether it's how you've eaten, how you've slept, how you're
Mhm.
breathing, how you're just feeling mentally, how you're supported. And so if you have the opportunity to do a check-in and really sense like, what am I made for today?
Yeah.
Then that day might mean I'm made for parking spots away or a
Yeah.
block away.
Mhm.
It also might mean I'm made for parking as close to the building and taking the elevator because today is not the day to push. And I
Right.
think that scale of possibilities, it's so helpful in giving us choices for
Yes.
what our challenges can be on those days. And I find it to be really liberating for folks who feel like there's a lot of limitations. It's like, yes, and there are, and also there's some things that we can work on that might be more helpful. So
Yeah. And I
thank you
think
for bringing
that
that one
as
up.
as long as we're trying our best, that if today is not as good as a couple of days ago, that's okay too, as long as you're still trying. Don't
Absolutely.
beat yourself up about the fact that, hey, I'm not able to do what I was able to do last week, or I have to
Yeah.
tell myself that constantly, because at the beginning of this year, I made a New Year's resolution for myself, Jenna. I did. I said,
Mm.
being someone who has lung health issues and my lungs are compromised, I'm not, which means that I'm not much of a runner. Although I was once
Mm-hmm.
athletic, I'm still not much of a runner nowadays. I wasn't then, I'm still not now. But at the beginning of this year, I said, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution to run as many 5K races as I can within the year of 2024, as many as I can fit into my
Wow.
schedule. And what I found is, here we are in April, almost mid-April. I've completed 6 5K races so far this year. And what I'm finding is that my time is getting better and faster each time. So I really think that it's helping to strengthen my lungs. So, but I had to
Absolutely.
to to admonish myself, because the first couple of races I was doing really great, and then third or fourth race I didn't think that my time had gotten better, and I started
Mm.
feeling down about it and started feeling discouraged. And actually, when I went back and looked at the official timing, my time had gotten better. But I remember that brief moment of thinking I didn't do uh, it better this time than I did last time in that 5K. And so
Yeah.
you can't beat yourself up. You just got to do the best you can on any given day. But as long as you're trying,
Right.
that is a good step right there.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what are you looking forward to in the coming months? We're just going into springtime at this point in time. What are some of the things that you're excited about in your life or with American Lung Association? But certainly, I want to hear about your life. That's the interesting
Right.
piece, right?
Well, first with the American Lung Association, it's a win-win with me because in addition to wanting to be helpful within the capacity of offering my patient perspective with the Lung Association's patient advisory group, but just also I love to travel. And so
Mm,
whenever we are able to travel to either the steering committee meetings or our next visit is going to be a visit to one of the Airways Clinical Research Centers. I'm excited
oh,
about that.
fantastic.
So it's a win-win. I'm looking forward to that. I'll always look forward to our gatherings in person because over the years you come to know the people who are a part of the organization, and we've become like a family. So it's almost like
Yeah.
many family reunions when we come together. So
Reunions.
looking
Yeah.
forward to those events with the Lung Association. Personally, I live in Central Florida, so looking forward to getting
Hmm.
back out on the beaches
Yeah.
here in the Central Florida area. But yeah,
It
just a
sounds
couple of
like
things.
it.
Yeah, a couple of things I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well,
Yes.
I look forward to, kind of following your journey and hopefully getting to know you a bit better
Yeah.
through our work with the Lung Association. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights and all of the information that's been so important to the American Lung Association through the volunteerism and the committee. It's been a pleasure to be here with you today, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much for asking me, first of all, and, feeling that I was worthy of the task. And I'm just excited to be included. I'm always excited to participate, and I'm always looking for new family members. So you're my new sister. So just so you know.
Yay! Well, you're
Yay.
my new
That's
sister.
right. That's
I
right.
love it. I
Always
love
looking for new
it.
family members. So thank you so much for being so kind and
You're
so patient
welcome.
with me and, inviting me in. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll look forward to moving with you in the Wellness Hub.
Yes, I'll see you in the Wellness Hub.